Good afternoon and welcome to the Pittsburgh Land Bank Board meeting for Friday, September 10th, 2021. Our first order of business is we're going to ask that Greg Miller would please call the roll.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So do we have Board Chair Reverend Burgess?
Here.
Board Vice.
Greg may have technical difficulties, so I'm prepared to step in here in the event that he does. Dr. Jamil Bey,
I am here.
Councilman Robert Lavelle,
Here.
Doug Anderson,
Here.
Senator Wayne Fontana,
Here.
our newest board member, Bobby Wilson,
Here.
Steve Mazza, not with us, and Wanda Wilson.
Here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to public comment. Are there any members of the public who want to give comment to this Land Bank Board of Directors? Seeing no public comment speakers, that gets us to the meat of our agenda. The first order of business is I need a motion to approve the July board minute meetings.
So moved.
So moved.
Just
Second.
a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. Well, I think that the next order of business is the good news is that council and the mayor's office in our negotiations together, we believe for equity's sake, one of the pillars of using this funds that Councilman Lavelle and I were part of the committee was to use the American Rescue funds to further equity in our city. And one of the things we believe is that affordable housing is a right and not a privilege. And so we believe that the land bank is an important tool in increasing affordable housing in this city. Therefore, we have set aside in its authorization $10 million for the land bank. And so I need a motion to empower the URA to enter into a cooperate. I think it's us entering into a cooperation to accept the $10 million from the American Rescue Plan funding. Is that such a motion?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. We just got 10 million. We just hit the lottery now. We just became $10 million richer. That turns us on that good news.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
being I am new to this, maybe I'm not familiar, but is there a discussion period where we can?
We can, yes, there's a discussion period. I was going to announce your newness later on, but since you're here, I do want to welcome Councilman Bobby Wilson. He is appointed by President Teresa Smith on her seat to the Pittsburgh Land Bank, and we're glad to have him. He has proven himself already to be an advocate for working people and for low and moderate income residents in the city of Pittsburgh. But yes, we can have a conversation.
Yeah, I want to ask about the 10. I want to ask about the 10 million.
Huh?
I wanted to. I mean, we already voted on it, but I was waiting for the discussion period to ask about the 10 million.
Go ahead, you can.
Yeah, I just want to know. Is there a report on what the money will be spent on? The staff. I didn't know if there was if this was the place where we're gonna lay out.
No, so our job, my job, is to get us to receive the money, and then Diamante Walker, the executive director of the land bank, would then lay out in her own way how this money will be spent and the places it will be spent on. So if that makes some sense. And so the appropriate person to talk to about the budgeting of those dollars for our approval, of course, is going to be Director Walker. Okay, and she's up next. So if you would like me to kind of Put
Okay.
those comments in the parking lot, and we can bring them back up under her portion of this meeting.
All right.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, so the next order of business is the executive director report. And so I will turn it now over to our very able, competent, and now PhD director, Dr. Diamante Walker.
Thank you, Reverend Burgess. And so welcome, Director Wilson. We are excited to have you here on the land bank. You have been a supporter of the land bank for a long time, and I know that your leadership here will help us to advance the strategy forward. So very excited to have you. And I will answer your question regarding an allocation proposal for the $10 million, which is, being drafted by staff, but will come under the purview and approval of this governing body. So with that, I'd like to welcome our post fellow, Emily Kolchak. I believe that she is here with us today. Emily, if you're there and you want to say a few words to the board, I'd love to have you do that.
Hello, everyone. Like Diamante so graciously said, my name is Emily Kauchak. I started this week with the URA as a Pulse Fellow, working with the Pittsburgh Land Bank. And I am very excited to be part of this team and to start tackling the issues that we see in the city that we all love. I'll definitely be reaching out to people. I have a lot of questions, but I'm very excited to start this work. So thank you all for having me here.
Thank you, Emily. And so for the board's edification, Emily will handle the daily operations of the PLB. She will support the public properties front door, which is something that we've been working on for the last 6 months so that it's easier for the public to interface with the land bank. She will also handle Community Development Corporation coordination and collaboration, and will focus on vacant, abandoned, and tax delinquent property analysis, which is something that's very important to the work of the land bank. And so Greg and I are going to sort of tag team this so that you know Greg Miller is the PLB's manager, and he does the on the ground work. He is the magic behind a lot of the productivity that you see happening here at the land bank. And so I'm going to have him cover a couple of these items simply because he's worked so diligently to bring them to fruition. So Greg, if you could cover the land care cooperation agreement for the board, that'd be great.
Yep, great. Thank you, Diamante. And if I just want to give advance notice, if I do tend to cut out or anything, I do have Julie Edwards or Diamante who can jump in and speak to anything that may become difficult to hear from my end. So we are looking to enter into an agreement with the URA in the city that currently exists, and it's a pilot program that the city and the URA have with the land care contract. And so we will be seeking an authorization from the Land Bank Board to enter into this agreement. The agreement is slated to renew in November. But essentially why we are looking to enter into this agreement is because we know that there is a significant amount of vacant and abandoned property throughout the city that either the URA or the city own and maintain. And so under the land care pilot program that exists between the city and the URA, the URA essentially maintains city-owned property in areas where there's high visibility. There are areas that are high foot traffic for residents, for kids going to school or residents going to work, places of employment. And so we think that it's a critical next step for the land bank to get involved in this initiative, because we think that by working together with both the city and the URA, we can tackle some of these nuisances, some of these frustrations that community members have with vacant and abandoned properties. And so, Councilman Wilson, to your question here, by getting authorization from the Land Bank Board to enter into this agreement with the city and the URA, we could see funds from the American Rescue Plan Act going towards this initiative. Working closely with the URA and the city, we would identify specific city-owned properties that could benefit from this arrangement, and coordinating closely with community groups to say, what are the problems that you have been facing for, problems with plant overgrowth or these properties are collecting debris and things like that, where can the land bank help support in cleaning these up and providing more maintenance to these properties? Because I do truly believe that if we can work together with our city partners and with the URA to tackle these issues of vacant and abandoned properties, we can really start to benefit, or we can really start to help the communities benefit from this arrangement. Because like I said at the onset, the vacancy and abandonment property is too large for only one entity or two entities to take on and work in silos. We need to start working together. And I believe that this is a good critical next step in doing so.
Okay. Any other conversation about this cooperation agreement?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
So my understanding, so this was previously managed by the URA?
So this is a program that is managed by the URA, but the land bank does, under its policies and procedures in our in our agreement with the URA, being an affiliate of the URA, we are able to use the land care contract as well. And so essentially what we would be doing by entering into this agreement with the city and the URA, we would be identifying additional city properties for the land bank to manage by way of the land care program. And we would be paying for that by the ARP funds.
Okay, so these are city-owned properties that we're going to go on to.
That's correct.
Not URA properties.
No, they're purely city-owned properties.
Mhm.
And primarily around like the avenues of hope. Talk about where they would be, like the avenues of hope.
That's correct. So they would be primarily focused in the areas of avenues of hope that the URA has across the city, and really focusing in on the networks that feed into the avenues of hope. Because you think about, these are the residential streets, these are the streets where people are coming to and from daily, whether they're leaving for school or coming home from work, what have you. But these properties are what greet neighborhood residents when they come home, unfortunately. And so if we can really create a better management process to ensure that there's not invasive plant overgrowth and all of these other sort of nuisances, but really just help in sort of stabilizing these properties, we think that this is an important way to kind of partner with the city and ensure that necessary maintenance is being met.
And what's the difference between this and City Source?
So this program, we could do both as an as-needed basis, which to my knowledge, that's kind of what City Source does to date. Whereas the land care program is more routine. It happens about once a month. And so by doing this, we would ensure that, again, not to harp or not to sound like a broken record, but this is just a more routine process for ensuring that these vacant lots aren't getting out of hand with, plant overgrowth and debris collection.
So you said city-owned properties. What about the 3 tax and body properties that, are just hanging out there?
So this agreement does not contemplate those. That is something that we are still working towards, to have that amended 3 taxing bodies agreement in place. We know that that's a larger initiative, and so we think that this is an adaptive sort of creative strategy just to tackle some of these problems of abandonment up front. We are closely working with the 3 taxing bodies on executing an amended 3 taxing bodies agreement. And we know again that that's a larger lift, but that work is ongoing. We just know that this is a current program that exists between the city and the URA, and we think that's an appropriate program for the land bank to get involved with for additional support.
I think
I'm not sure I understand. I'm not sure I understand why the land bank would be maintaining city-owned properties. So I'm not clear, and it seems to be coming somewhat out of left field. Like, our goal is to clear title on properties and then transfer them to other owners. I don't believe that, it's my understanding that the land bank's role is to be an agent of taking care of city-owned properties. That doesn't seem to be our role.
Well, I respect that opinion, but I do believe that as the land bank, we should be able to properly maintain and stabilize properties. community residents don't deserve, and they deserve more respect when there are properties with significant plant overgrowth, and we have the funding, the resources, the capacity to provide routine maintenance and stabilization efforts.
I'd
in
like to
addition
be
to
clear that
planting on
I'm not
properties that
stating,
are, with single.
if I could, I'm not stating that this isn't an issue. I just don't understand why the land bank would be doing this for properties that the city owns.
We are adding another resource to the city's limited resources for combating this issue of vacant and abandoned properties. We know that the city has a current program in place, which is the City Source program. They also have a pilot program with the URA through this land care program to provide more routine maintenance on a monthly basis, whereas to my knowledge, City Source is usually twice a year. And so this would provide more, property landscaping, land care opportunities where we can't right now acquire and dispose of property and quiet the title because we don't have an amended 3 taxing bodies in place. That is work that is ongoing. It takes time just to coordinate between the various stakeholders. And so we think as an immediate next step, just to do something on the ground to support communities, this is something that we can do to help them. Because ultimately we all want the 3 taxing bodies agreement amendment to be in place so that we can acquire, stabilize, maintain, and dispose of property to competent end users, providing necessary benefits to the communities. But that work takes time. And while we are working towards that, we want to do something proactive on the ground to help the city with its,
I do not believe there's been enough information provided to the board about this.
So let me do this. So I think that what we can do, one, I think the goal here, these are properties that would more than likely be in the land bank's coffers if it were not for the entanglements around the 3 taxing body agreements. So I think the goal here is to be proactive and preemptive, so that while we're trying to figure out procedural issues on the back end, communities are not continuing to deal with the blight and the issues that can be remedied. One, because we now have the resources and capacity to do so. I think that's the intent here. What I think makes more sense at this juncture, if you're not comfortable, Director Wilson, we can provide more of an overview and a briefing of what the vision is to address these properties, particularly around the avenues of hope, and then come back to the board after presentation to ask you to enter into an authorized agreement. The URA has facilitated this program as a way to support minority and women-owned businesses, as well as workforce development entities. It's been extremely successful and it's been very positively received by communities. There's an opportunity here to have the land bank complete its function, which is to intercede and to be that community resource. I don't think that there's enough information here yet to make a full decision, and I'm happy to bring this back next month or the month after with a more drilled down, some more detail for you if that's needed.
Yeah, thank you. I also would just, there wasn't much information overall in the board packet that we received, really pretty much about a lot of the things before us.
To the board, let me tell you at least my thinking about this, and I'm ambivalent about when we enter into the agreement. This particular project uses women and minority, small women and minority businesses to do so. We are going to need to come together and have an agreement with someone when we start maintaining properties, because we are required to maintain properties that we take. My view, and I think I agree with one that we need more clarity, but my view is that these cleaning properties should be properties that are somehow linked directly to the land bank, like those in the property reserves that we're going to eventually take, or properties that we identify that we're going to take, imminently. It should not be properties just because residents want it and like it. It should be directly related to properties that the land bank is going to seize and then be required to maintain. So I think that when you come back to us, perhaps next month, I think that should be the focus of how these particular funds should be used. Does that make some sense to everyone?
Right. And I think
Yeah.
what I was hearing in Wanda's question was something about, nobody's denying that this is not a necessary and this is valuable program, but how are we justifying it as a land bank program? And what you just said, Chairman, helps to clarify that. Are we signaling or indicating that once this happens, these properties are in that process or in the pipeline? Is that
That is the intent.
Yes.
okay? And so I think that needs to be clear.
That is the intent. And so and so I think that we can make that abundantly more clear. I know that the board has said that you wanted to be more directly involved around avenues of hope, and that, we have, been saying that communities are bearing the burden of blighted properties that could, be maintained and stewarded by the land bank to find, productive end users. We've not yet figured out the legal haranguing to be able to do that. And this is a way to intervene preventatively. But I hear the board's consternation, and we will come back next month with a fuller presentation in hopes of building that comfort level. And this is to be tethered to properties that are in the pipeline to come into the land bank. It's just giving us a head start to start cleaning them up now while communities are waiting.
So the management of these properties before we acquire them, the cost of that will come out of the 10 million.
The cost of that is, so right now the city allocates about $250,000 to this end. And so, but there's a lack of capacity there. The land care program has the capacity. The way that we see this program being ongoing is through the use of those American Rescue Plan Act dollars, which would be a part of the allocation plan that would come before the board.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
we will not take a vote on this. We will leave it, and I think we can revisit it at the next board meeting. If that can do that by common consent, we'll just move forward. If you would go now to the property updates.
Okay, thank you, board, for your feedback. I really appreciate that, and I know we'll come back with more information at the future meeting. But I do want to give you a couple of updates here about some properties that the land bank is working on. So 6 Boggs Avenue is one that has been very active recently, and we really look at this project as a test case to understand our disposition process, because once we have the 3 taxing bodies amended agreement in place, we're going to be acquiring, disposing of property much more rapidly than obviously than we have been. But also we know that we want these properties to move through efficiently into hands of competent end users, so that we can actually start to see vacancy and abandonment decrease in the city. And so 6 Boggs is really a good example for a pilot sandbox scenario, just to understand, make sure we iron out the kinks. And just to give you a little bit of context here for 6 Boggs Avenue, we have 11 interested buyers on the property. They all have received a property transfer application. These property transfer applications were available online on the URA's available website. They basically submitted an inquiry on this property, and then they were emailed a property transfer application. All of these property transfer applications are due September 30th. And then from there, the land bank staff, myself, Diamante included, and URA team will review the applications, and we will select who we believe is a competent end user and who is providing an appropriate end use. We plan to bring this in front of the land bank board and the October meeting, where we basically present our nomination to you all and see if we can move forward with the actual disposition of that property. A few other things to note here is that 5 of the interested buyers have reached out for tours of the property. So I have taken them on walking tours of the property. We reviewed the structure and any kind of necessary improvements that they had in mind at the time. I also met with Mount Washington CDC to just generally talk about the project, how it aligns with their comprehensive plan for the neighborhood, and if they had any outstanding concerns or comments about the property's disposition and end use. I also will be closely coordinating with Councilwoman Kell Smith on this disposition of the property, just to ensure that she has, that she's in line with whatever disposition decision we make, but also making sure that she, you know, again, similar to Mount Washington CDC, knowing if she has any specific end use goals in mind for this particular property. So that is 6 Boggs Avenue. If there's no questions, we can move on to the second property update. So the next update here is 243 Meadow Street. This property has seen some recent activity, which is really reassuring. Our contract with Dickey McCamey, they have filed an action to quiet title with the courts. That process has went through, and now there were 2 appearances on the petition, and so Dickey McCamey is working closely with those 2 appearances to resolve any outstanding issues, so that we can have a final execute a quiet title and then move through the process of disposition for this property. So again, positive news here. The property is moving through its final quiet title steps. Now, this is a notification of properties that the land bank is looking to acquire from the URA. There are 6 properties in total, one of which I just mentioned, 6 Boggs Avenue. The other 5 are properties that we would be doing a similar process of disposition, looking for requests for information and proposals. You know, these properties, the URA has seen a lot of interest from various stakeholders in acquiring these properties. So we believe that the land bank won't be holding these for too long. These will be properties with a pretty quick disposition. Of course, these properties will be going to an end use that we all support. Basically, they are providing affordable home ownership opportunities. And so, you know, again, I think that these properties totally align with the land bank's policies and procedures, where, again, we're creating affordable housing home ownership opportunities. We're also supporting neighborhood vitality, of course, by getting vacant and abandoned properties back to a productive use. And it also helps support the city's tax base. So again, as I mentioned with 6 Boggs Avenue, we really see these as a good sandbox set of properties to really test out our disposition process, our collaboration with local community groups, local council members that are, you know, these districts are, these properties are located within. And again, these properties are something that will benefit the community in the long run. I do want to note that 847 Gehring is a property that we would be partnering with PHDC on. PHDC is looking to provide the affordable housing homeownership opportunity at 80% AMI. They are also looking to work with MWBE contractors on the property. And so this property, as well as what we hope to be many more, will be partnering with PHDC on in the future to create affordable housing opportunities.
And the community partner on 847 Gearing Avenue is the Beltsuver Consensus Group. So this has been, they are an active member of the Vacant Property Working Group and have several properties in the property reserve, and they've asked to advance this property forward.
Yep.
I have a question. That's what I was kind of wondering is how do we decide to purchase these properties?
So it's a combination of things. One, it's knowing that we have a competent stakeholder partners. So again, PHDC is one that we know we'll be working with closely in the future, but then also the local community group as well. So we know, and my apologies for overlooking that detail. So thank you, Diamante, for pointing that out. But with Beltsuver, the 847 Gehring property, this is one that we are looking to work closely with the Beltsuver Consensus Group on, as well as other properties that they're waiting on in the property reserve. And so by partnering and working closely with these CDC groups, you know, hopefully we can start to establish a process where we are supporting their broader community goals of getting some of these vacant and abandoned properties back to a productive use.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, you know, overall, My concern is just like, we're spending this time on individual properties, and there's just thousands of these properties like this. And I'm wondering, are we gonna, like, is this the process that we're gonna go through for each individual property, or are we gonna have some sort of like, understanding of a larger concept of like that meets our end goals, which is, I guess one is, you could say, is the affordable housing home ownership. So I'm just wondering, like, are we going to go through this process for each individual property? Like one day, will there be 1,000 properties that we're going through on a sheet like this?
Yeah, and that's the goal.
In a board meeting?
Yeah,
Because
that
we
would
know
be the
there's
goal.
we know there's tens of thousands of properties like this.
Yeah, that would be the goal. So part of the challenge here is that the land bank cannot acquire property or hold property that it cannot steward. So we've been limited to take large swaths of land simply because there's not been the funding. There's no earmark for the land bank in the capital budget. There's no earmark for the land bank in the city's operating budget. So the URA has, dedicated significant resources to date to try to steward and shepherd land in its holdings that could be, sort of land bank properties. So the first thing that we're trying to do is move and activate some of those properties that have been held by the URA, particularly, and try to move those into the land bank's portfolio in a way that's digestible. Adjacent to this conversation is a broader conversation about how to raise money and do a capital campaign for the land bank so we can address the problem at the scale that it exists. That's been an ongoing conversation here at the board and in some, at some committee level discussions. You will hear us talk about in a moment about one of the huge impediments to the land bank becoming operational, which is the ability to clear title on large swaths and a large portfolio of land. We cannot do that without being in right cooperation with the city of Pittsburgh. So we are actively and have been working for months to try to get to some cooperative agreement. We've not yet been successful in doing that, but we have continued to reach out and to try to facilitate and have those conversations. Until the structural fixes are made for the land bank, we're not going to be in a position to talk about thousands of parcels. So we have been trying to do, more piecemeal to pilot and put together an effective apparatus. So once those procedural issues are outlined, I believe that we can move with more speed and agility. I just want to be very transparent that we are not there yet, and we're not going to get there until we have the unified cooperation of all of the taxing bodies, PWSA, and, in this board.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the detail. I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
I want to jump in here a second, if you don't mind. I mean, I think we have to be careful. We don't want to be carrying a lot of properties, and there's a cost to maintain them, obviously, and becomes a problem. I think if we're sitting on hundreds of vacant properties, I think that the other part of this is the process of selling them, right, or moving them, back onto the tax rolls. And I guess at some point we're going to need to define that process. How do we do that? Because I think we need to get in front here on that, because if you're going to look at 6 bogs and you had a tour of 5 people, I mean, how's the price set? Do we do appraisals? Do these folks are going to be asking for inspections, termite, radon, whatever? Are we doing that? Are they buying it as is? Is there financing in place? Are we sending them to certain places? Doing backgrounds on these folks. Is there a process in actually moving the properties? Because I think we don't want to be sitting on a lot of properties for very long, I would think. We want to keep moving them. So I think we need to think about that too. Maybe you already have, and I just don't know it, but that's just something I wanted to throw out there.
We thought about that in theory. We thought about that in theory, and I think that we have the policies and procedures. We've not been able to demonstrate it. So part of what you're seeing here is us working through that process and working out some of the kinks so that we can codify it. I mean, some of this has to be done. You can't document everything on paper and not ever having done it. And so you're seeing examples of the commercial property, a few vacant lots, a few structures that will help us to figure out the disposition process is already defined. We've got to model it so that we can present that to the board to codify it and make it permanent.
And I would like to
go ahead, Wanda. I'm sorry.
I'd like to remind the board that we went through an entire process of really prioritizing the property reserve. The groups that have properties in the property reserve today are ready to take title of those properties.
Yes.
So it would not be the situation where we would be holding a property and not knowing its future disposition. So I suggest that we prioritize those. Those community groups have been waiting, and it's an urgent issue in a lot of communities. So why wouldn't we prioritize properties that are already in the property reserve? And there was a whole committee of this board who went through an entire process to say, here would be our procedure for that.
We
Yep.
have, we
So-
are, and we have, and you'll hear that in a moment. That's going to be, we kind of buried the lead here, but the last thing that we'll talk about is we found a path to rapidly clear title on the property reserve. We cannot do it until the city allows us to enter into contract with the firm that has been identified to do that. Until that happens, we are in a holding pattern. So what I've had staff doing is while we're waiting for city law to make that determination, we've tried to do other things so that they're not sitting there kind of twiddling their thumbs. But the priority are the properties that are in the property reserve. That is where 80% of the focus and time is spent right now, but we're at an impasse until we get the legal agreement signed.
And can I just say one thing?
Mhm.
Staff, and just for a reminder for the board, and especially for our newest board member, Councilman Wilson, staff is only following and vetting properties against the policies and procedures that we've already set up and put in place, as well as the strategic plan that we've already put in place. So when they are bringing these 6 properties forward, they are literally the result of have been vetted against what we've asked them to do. And these properties have end users, community groups that are actively waiting to then be able to move forward with either fixing up or building new.
Yes, thank you, Councilman Lavelle, for that distinction. Sorry, I lost words, but I did want to touch on Senator Fontana. So again, like Councilman Lavelle said, this process is codified and memorialized in the policies and procedures. And what Diamante was saying, we actually have to start testing this policies and procedures disposition process with properties. So rather than taking on a whole 100 properties, we really want to make sure that we can cross our T's and dot our I's with 6 properties or a handful of properties, and make sure that we've done the right steps. We've reached out to the community groups. We've touched base with the council members. We know that there's going to be some things we learn along the way, but we think that if we can bite off something small, really test out this process, that'll help inform how we can broadly support other community groups who have been waiting on properties. And to your point, Wanda, properties that they have been waiting on for a number of years that are stuck in the city's property reserve. So if we can advance to the next slide, I can start to address that. Diamante had touched on this, but this is something that is critical. We know that this is a pain point that many community groups have faced and still struggle with today, because they put properties into the city's Pittsburgh property reserve, or they had nominated them for the reserve. The city took them through the T-cell. And so, we're seeing properties that went in 2016, they are still stuck in this holding pattern. And if it's a vacant property, if it's a vacant structure, that same vacant structure is not the same structure today that it was in 2016. There may be more costs associated with it, but also importantly, what the effects that vacant property has on the community, the nuisances, things like that we're also trying to address by maintaining and stabilizing property. And so we think that this agreement that we have put forth with the city through GRB law would help provide an additional resource to the city's law department for processing title work on Pittsburgh property reserve properties. And we estimate that there would be about 80 properties, some of which are currently sitting in the property reserve. Others were nominated for the reserve, but the reserve shut off and stopped accepting properties. And so they're still earmarked for CDC groups, but they're just kind of sitting in the city's general inventory. And so we believe that these properties could go through this process of quiet title with GRB law GRB law would be quieting the title on behalf of the city, and then the city would issue a deed to the CDC groups that nominated those properties into the reserve in the first place. This, we believe, is a creative strategy to kind of address the immediate pain points that community groups are facing. Of course, in the future, the optimal goal is for the land bank to just acquire properties at a treasury sale or a sheriff sale and, do the quiet title work on our own capacity, and then be able to dispose of those properties to various CDC groups. But because that amended 3 taxing bodies agreement isn't in place, this is kind of another adaptive strategy to help support community groups. And so just to kind of close the loop on this with the board, so we are currently awaiting city laws, confirmation and proposed next steps and how to engage in this particular agreement with GRB and the city of in the Pittsburgh Land Bank. And from there, we can, hopefully at the next board meeting, we'll be able to update you on where we are with that process. But again, we had presented the case to city law, and they are currently deciding on what the mechanics of that are and how we can best move forward.
I appreciate the update and attention to this and the creative thinking. I think if I could request that there would be more information in the board packet prior to the meeting about items like this, so that the board would have a chance to see it prior to the board meeting.
Sure.
Yes,
Thank you.
now that we have the post fellow, the board package, it's been a capacity issue. The post fellow is now being onboarded, and we'll be handling making sure that the board packets have a lot more detail in them than we've been able to provide to date.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I just feel like this level of complexity requires a little bit more briefing items in the board packet for the board.
Sure.
Yeah, Moni, I also think that, and normally I would have done it. Now that we have an executive director, we're sort of in the, I'm not sure whose responsibility is, but we probably need to sit down and have a briefing, an extended briefing with Councilman Wilson between now and the next board meeting. So I don't know who should do that. Greg should do that, but if you would kind of be responsible for doing that, because yeah, I think that's right.
So I think that we were prepared. We thought that he would be coming on in November. So
yeah, I thought he was coming on. I actually thought he was. I didn't say anything, but I didn't know he was coming on this soon myself. Because normally we would have set some. I would have set some time, as I have every other board member. All of you, I think, know that. I would have set up some time to orientate him myself. Yeah. But he's here with us now, so let's between now and the next board meeting, let's provide him with.
I think it may already be on the calendar. I'm not sure. I think the date may already be set on the calendar. I know that the staff, when we saw the announcement, we started proactively reaching out to his staff to try to get something scheduled to give him a proper briefing. There's been some briefing, but more so in his capacity as a council member. So they are putting together some material to brief him as a board member. It was scheduled to happen, and it'll happen before the next board meeting. We'll move it up to be between September and October instead of October and November.
Yeah, and have at least either me or Marita in that meeting with him too, maybe both of us or either one of us, so that we can also give him the other side, which is the council side of the relationship. I think that would be helpful too.
Greg will run point on that. We'll make sure that happens.
All right, I think
it's scheduled for the end of September.
Okay.
All right, cool. Because we want to make sure you're up to speed and can and are comfortable. So I think the next thing that brings us to, I think, is the financial report. Great.
Yep. So we can, there was one outstanding agreement update just to we can touch on just quickly, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Memorandum of Understanding. So this is an agreement that basically ensures a process moving forward where when the land bank acquires any property that has a PWSA lien on it, one, that it either, we can either just have the PWSA forgive the existing liens on the property, with the knowledge that the land bank is returning that property back to an active use, or if we need to also address you know, a resolution for kind of settling any outstanding PWSA liens. But I would say that it's essentially similar to what we are looking for with the larger 3 taxing bodies agreement. However, I know that the 3 taxing bodies agreement deals with taxes. PWSA lien here PWSA will be dealing with the liens, but essentially establishing a process moving forward for our larger operational agreements. Okay.
That's good. So if you go now to the financial report, I don't see any questions about that.
Okay, so the financial report, so this is both for July and August expenditures. We do have quite a few here, totaling at $12,762.62. You can see some of the common ones that have popped up in the past, such as Google G Suite posts, the Post Gazette notice, but we also had some new bills related to some of our title work. You'll see GRB Law, Dickie McCamey is with 243 Meadow Street. We also had to renew our insurance. And so we have that. And then as well as now that we have Emily on board, we also have some of our Pulse Fellow bills coming through from Pulse.
Okay, you've heard that. I guess that I need a motion to accept and approve the financial report.
So move.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed was nay. That brings us, it's proved, that brings us to, we're really grateful to have, which makes a great difference. And our board, Bobby, one of the things we had to get up a 2-for-1. We have a sitting Pennsylvania State Senator who's also a real estate expert. So we get a 2-for-1. So we're going to ask at this time if Senator Fontana would now give us a legislative update.
Thank you, Reverend. The update is coming up on Wednesday, September 22nd. The bipartisan bicameral blight task force will be meeting in Harrisburg to discuss several bills, with one of them being my Senate Bill 811. It has been brought to my attention that this is one of the bills that the task force will be advocating for during this fall session coming up. Recently, Senator Argyle, who's the Republican who heads this, obviously the majority party, we need them on board to move properties or legislation, I should say. Senator Argyle has signed on as a co-sponsor to this bill, which in my view is very promising. In advance of that meeting, I will be distributing a letter next week to members of the House and Senate Urban Affairs Committee from the various stakeholders that are supporting Senate Bill 811 throughout Pittsburgh and the Allegheny County region, asking the chairman to consider this bill in committee ASAP. That's my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
If there are no questions, that takes us to our new business, which I do not see any. Is there any other member of the public now that's online that wants to address this board? We have 2 parts of public comment, one at the beginning and one at the end. Seeing none.
But I had a question real quick. This might be useful for the new board member, Councilman Wilson. We talked before, you know, as we're watching the progress, you know, and it really we ramped up in the last few months, and with this additional money, as we were talking about removing some of the barriers. And can you update us? Where are we with getting the legislation amended so that we can add school board members? And now it may even make sense to consider a PWSA rep, just so that we can expedite the process of moving properties. Or has that been considered in council?
It's not being considered in council. It is going to, yes, we do understand that the school board informally is asking for representation. And so and we have not, that's, I think, and I'm not directly involved with the negotiation, but I believe we're still in the negotiating process. I think that's where we're at. Director Walker?
So yes, we've continued to have conversations with the Pittsburgh School Board. We know that they're going through a leadership transition right now. So we engage their business and finance committee, I believe, and they again reiterated the desire not only to have a presence on the Pittsburgh Land Bank's board, but to have equal representation to the city. So I continue to say that I think that this is something that we need to figure out, but I think that it's now become a conversation that has to happen at city council level, since legislation would need to be changed. It's not necessarily solely incumbent upon the board. The board would need to be supportive of that change, but city council would need to reimagine the legislation to accommodate the level of representation that is desired at this juncture. We were told that we would be re-invited to the committee at some point in time, that we've not yet received that invitation, but Greg is closely tracking this. And, I think too, I think that we still have to look at the classifications of what where you need to satisfy board membership. And with the inclusion of Council Member Bobby Wilson, we now have North Side representation in addition to the council person being seated. So I think that we were having conversations before when that space was kind of vacant and open. So we need to circle back. I would recommend talking about this and doing a formal briefing, maybe in executive session, to land the plane a little bit and really hear from the board what the priorities are with respect to increasing its membership and representation.
So Mr. Wilson, this gets to your question earlier, when, as we're going through these procedures and learning how to do this and what those hurdles might be, one of the things we are seeing if the school district is one of the taxing boards, that once we start doing this at scale, we need them on board rather than, let's get them on board in the discussion process rather than afterwards and, hitting walls then. So it's just, I think it's just a prudent move. And I'm, glad that Diamante is leading that.
Yeah, I've been looking into what you're talking about, and I've become familiar with this. And I did have a question about the state legislation. Then, has the school board agreed to the state legislation, or is that why we're moving forward?
Yes, the one maybe can answer too, or I don't know if David's on, but yeah, that's the point. And there was some hard negotiations in the beginning, trying to get everyone to agree. But this legislation is a plus for everybody, even all the taxing bodies, to move these properties and get them back onto the tax rolls. It benefits everyone. But it's I think some of the issue is what just was talked about, being on boards and having a say, and honestly, probably some trust, that we had to break down some barriers and realize there's nobody trying to get over on anybody else here. It's not like, we don't want folks to pay their school taxes and they only pay the city tax. There was a little bit of a trust issue, for at least my read on it. I think we've overcome that and we've moved forward. So the stall is in Harrisburg is just Harrisburg. It takes a long time to get things through. I mean, unfortunately, and the majority party controls, but we are making progress, believe it or not. And even though it's taken some time, convincing the majority party that this is good, and it's not, it's something we're leading by example, because other parts of the state would, are going to be looking at this and saying we maybe should be doing this too. So, we'll keep pushing. I have my staff pushing all the time, talking to other staff. So we're working on it very hard up there, but we're trying to expedite. We really are, but it takes time.
I would echo those sentiments. I think that at the local level, this comes down to trust and relationship building between governmental parties. That's a lot of what I'm seeing at some of these tables. And so I do want to hold up PWSA right now for being a strong intergovernmental partner and really helping us to move this forward. Those were not easy decisions to make. And so I would encourage our other governmental partners to kind of look at that as a model for how we can get this done.
We will, we'll continue with, we'll do two things. So two things are noted. One is more detail on the package that comes to the board. And the second thing is we'll certainly work with Councilman Wilson to get him up to speed over the 2 years, or maybe even longer it's taken us to get to this point. So if there is, and there was no other member of the public to address the board, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposers, nay. We're adjourned. Be blessed, everybody.